I don't know how good or bad. Like, you look at that Oilers game, early on, the Leafs played pretty tight with them, and then Edmonton kept coming on, and by the end of it, they were carrying the play. But you were leading at one point. If you managed to pot one there early in the third or something, maybe that's different, and we're having a whole different conversation. But you have now blown a few different leads. I don't think that we're going to see this year, but do you think there's merit to the conversation of a mid-season coaching change? And, maybe we'd be that team that gets the bump like other teams have, and everyone but the Sens seems to get. I'm just sort of curious, is there merit to talking about it? Because, when we didn't change the big four last year, and we didn't change the coach last year, and we changed the GM, which I don't think was what anyone predicted was going to be the case. As you suggested earlier, you walk back in going, all right, I guess we're running it back. If you're not yet willing to trade any of your big stars, and you're not going to make any big moves at the deadline, do you think, like I said, whether you believe they'll do it or not, do you think it's a reasonable conversation to be having that, if this road trip doesn't go very well, maybe you're coming home to a new coach?
I think there's merit. I think the organization really likes him, and we saw that with how they went about searching for a GM. Like, Shanahan would say, "Oh, you get to choose the coach," but there was also kind of reporting that he was like, "Give serious consideration to Keefe," and it seemed like they like Keefe.
Yeah.
So it would have to be something dramatic, like maybe they lose out on the road trip and these games aren't close, and then they've got games coming up with Winnipeg, and those aren't easy either. So like they could go on some horrific stretch here where they're like, okay, even if we're going to make the playoffs, we need to do something. But I do think that sort of conceptually, it's definitely worthy of consideration. Like, you can give Sheldon Keefe credit for his regular season record, and it's hard to dispute. I think he at times has done a good job tightening up defense on a roster where you wouldn't intuitively think that the defense would be that good.
Yep.
But at the same time, a lot of the power play success, you're going to give a coach credit for that. That's often the assistant, and they just have the personnel to be really good at that. I'm not sure that Keefe has done a ton to elevate the talent that he's had, which is kind of the prism by which we look at coaches. And it might be that there's just something stale about the Toronto Maple. I mean, I think there is something kind of stale about the Toronto Maple Leafs in general. And if management opted to do that, I would be surprised. I'm not that person who's like, this needs to happen tomorrow, or it's a joke franchise. Like, there's some people who are furious and they want to see that happen tomorrow.
Yeah, Keefe's been trending all day on Twitter today, which is a reasonable place to have a conversation, obviously.
Of course, if not the best. But if they did that, I would not be coming out and criticizing it. I'd be like, okay, that's understandable. Like, they need to find something. They've got Guy Boucher there as someone who could kind of internally step in with a lot of experience and, a reputation for getting teams to play well defensively at times.
Yeah, that does not excite me. If they're doing it, they better be going for somebody outside the organization.
It's tough to do that mid-season.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, like, his presence maybe would make them more comfortable doing it. I'm not sure. Again, I know that not everyone's had the best experience with him. I think the conclusion I'm coming to is that, yes, I think there'd be a move that's totally justifiable to do. And that doesn't mean that they need to do it or that they will do it. But it is, they've got not that many arrows in the quiver here, especially with their lack of trade ammunition. And that is something that is available to Treliving. And it's something that I think he'll have to consider. But I would still be surprised if it happens, because I think overall the organization thinks highly of him, for better or for worse. And it is very hard to evaluate coaching on the outside. I'll say that. Like, I think a lot of times fans get so angry at coaches, and sometimes it's difficult to know. There's a lot of things we don't see that coaches do, and Keefe's results are good. If he's well liked in the room and in the organization, I get it. But yeah, that's something that ought to be thought about, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think over the last couple of years, you look at the groups that they have had on the blue line, and you would say that they have been better defensively than those names would suggest they should be, and Keefe obviously deserves some credit for that. So, look, it's going to be an interesting stretch. If there's anything worse than your team enduring a long-term losing streak, it's while it's happening late night out west while you're having to stay up to watch it. So it could be a long week ahead